A series of death threats arrived like poisoned love letters, meticulously composed by that mysterious author. A young wife of exquisite beauty finds herself stalked by a shadowy beast. When I behold this vision of tremulous beauty, her kimono sleeve quivers like a trapped butterfly. Could I, a purveyor of mere fictional mysteries, snatch this exquisite prey from the jaws of the shadow beast? Hi, this is Midnight Corridor. Tonight we are going to read Beast in the Shadows by Edogawa Ranpo. The story began beneath the colossal glass dome of Tokyo's Imperial Household Museum. I, a novelist who made my living weaving tales of deduction, found myself entranced by an ancient Egyptian mask displayed in its glass case. The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass, casting dappled patterns upon the floor. And at that very moment, a figure intruded upon my line of sight. She was a woman clad in a kimono, perhaps in her early 30s, her hair arranged in an impeccably neat chignon. The slender wrists peeking from her sleeves resembled the finest white porcelain. What caught my attention most, however, was a faint crimson mark on the left side of her neck, visible through the translucent collar like a smear of dried blood, or perhaps an uncanny birthmark. She stood before the exhibit of Indian stone carvings, her fingertip lightly touching her chin, her gaze so intensely focused that it seemed as though the entire museum had dissolved, leaving only her and those silent statues in a world of their own. The conversation began abruptly. Whether I had spoken first or she had initiated it, I could not tell. "Do you too take an interest in these uncanny foreign arts?" She turned, her eyes gliding with just the right measure of surprise. "You as well? I've always felt these stones hold secrets sealed away by time." Her voice was like silk steeped in dew. "I am Shizuko Oyamada, a frequent visitor here." We spoke for a while, our discussion drifting from Gantara Buddhas to Edo period ukiyo-e. She confessed she was the wife of industrialist Rokuro Oyamada, yet held no interest in her husband's commercial empire. Her obsession lay solely in literature. As we parted, she took the business card I offered, her fingertips brushing lightly against mine. The coolness of her touch sent an inexplicable shudder through me. A week later, an envelope bearing elegant handwriting appeared on my desk. Our correspondence continued for 3 months, discussing everything from Baudelaire's decadent poetics to Collins's detective novels. Shizuko's letters were sharp and profound, her insights always offering me fresh inspiration, unlike what one might expect from a sheltered society matron. Then, on a certain early summer morning, a note slipped out from the envelope. "Might I visit you tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon? There is something I find myself unable to confide in anyone else about." In my study, the oak bookshelves cast mottled shadows in the twilight. As the antique clock ticked steadily, I was just shelving the last volume of New Tales of the Strange when the doorbell rang. Shizuko stood at the entrance, the hem of her wisteria-colored kimono dusted with ginkgo leaves. Her fingers, twisting the tassels of her obi, were pale with tension, and in her usually serene eyes flickered ripples of unease. "Have you heard of Oshunde?" she asked. The name was, of course, familiar to me, a writer specializing in grotesque fiction, his works filled with locked-room murders, cursed dolls, and other macabre tales. Yet he remained an enigma, never appearing in public. "I know of him. Why do you ask?" With a sudden motion, Shizuko shook a bundle of envelopes from her sleeve, their edges crumpled from repeated handling. He has been tormenting me," her voice trembled. "We were lovers when we were young, but after I married Rokuro, all contact ceased. Yet recently, he has begun reaching out again." Shizuko had grown up in affluence, her life one of contentment until her graduation from girls' school. In her youth, swayed by the honeyed words of a man, she had indulged in a fleeting romance, more a capricious imitation of her peers than true affection. But while her feelings were shallow, his became an obsession. She began avoiding his relentless advances, only to provoke greater fixation. Soon, shadows lurked beyond her family's walls at night, and threatening letters arrived in steady succession. The terror of youthful folly turned to dread weighed heavily upon her. The once carefree girl now trembled in fear, her distress so palpable that even her parents grew deeply troubled. But soon, a great misfortune befell Shizuko's family, though for her it proved to be a blessing in disguise. The financial world was in turmoil at the time. Her father, having mismanaged his business and incurred massive debts, hastily shuttered his operations and fled under cover of night with help from a friend, disappearing under an assumed name. Shizuko was forced to withdraw from school midterm. Yet for her, this sudden relocation meant escape from his relentless pursuit. A relief, in truth. Her voice choked with emotion as she haltingly recounted those fear-stricken days. The threatening letters had not only detailed her daily movements with unsettling precision, but also seethed with madness and venom, leaving her sleepless night after night. She had believed the past buried, never imagining that this haunting nightmare would resurface years later to ensnare her once more. I'd heard the name Oe Shunde long ago, but I never dreamed he might be my ex-lover, Shizuko explained to me. I drew out one of the letters. Its envelope bore no postage, clearly hand-delivered. Unfolding the page, I was met with a scrawl that exuded an indescribable eeriness. Miss Shizuko, I have found you at last. The moment I saw you again, I began following you, learning your current address, discovering you now bear the name Oyamada. Surely you haven't forgotten me. You must remember what a detestable lover I was. But you, fickle heart that you are, could never comprehend the torment I endured after you cast me aside. How could you understand the agony of a man scorned by his beloved? For years, I searched for you, drowning in an obsession from which I could not escape. Even after marrying, your specter haunted the depths of my soul. All those years of longing twisted slowly into something far more corrosive, a malice that gnaws at the bone. About 3 years ago, I wrote a story to vent my anguish. Yet that very story became my salvation. You must have heard of the writer Oe Shunde. That man is none other than myself. Did you imagine I would lose myself in the hollow fame of a novelist and forget my hatred for you? No. Those bloody tales of mine were born from the depths of my loathing for you. The paranoia, the obsession, the cruelty, every word drips with my relentless thirst for vengeance. Shizuko, I know all your secrets. Soon you will understand the price of betrayal. The letter went on to detail Shizuko's daily routines and private habits, a chilling testament to his surveillance. At the bottom, scrawled in crimson ink, was the distorted outline of a beast, and beside it, the words, "Yours eternally, Oe Shunde." How could he know all this? I instinctively crumpled the letter in my grip. Are you certain it's from him? Who else could it be? Shizuko's eyes reddened. Suddenly, she seized my wrist, her kimono collar slipping to reveal that crimson mark once more. Sir, I'm terrified. I feel eyes watching me day and night. As I studied the tremble of her lashes, a complex tide of emotions surged within me. Pity for the suffering beauty, yes, but also the keen instincts of a mystery novelist. What seemed mere harassment concealed darker undercurrents. I gently patted her quivering shoulder. Don't fear, I'll help you. I'll find Oe Shunde and end this. Her tearful gaze met mine, brimming with gratitude and dependence. After seeing her out, I sat at my desk, poring over the threatening letters for clues. Yet the deeper I delved, the more the truth seemed shrouded in an impenetrable fog, elusive, inscrutable. One day, Shizuko Oyamada called me at my residence, her voice trembling as she spoke of another terrifying incident. She begged me to visit her home at once. Her husband was away, and most of the servants had been sent off on distant errands, leaving her alone to await my arrival. By dismissing even the usual unreliable servants during her husband's absence and secretly summoning me to her home, this invitation carried an unspoken implication that stirred indescribable emotions within me. The Oyamada residence stood tucked away behind storefronts, an old-fashioned Western-style villa with a melancholic elegance tinged with decay. Though its front gave no indication, I suspected a great river must flow behind the house. After presenting my card, a young country maid led me to the parlor of the Western-style annex, where Shizuko waited with an expression most peculiar. She repeatedly apologized for the impropriety of this meeting before suddenly lowering her voice. Please look at this first. She handed me an envelope. Then, as if fearing something, glanced nervously behind her and leaned closer. Needless to say, the letter bore the unmistakable mark of Oe Shunde, yet its contents held a disturbing evolution from before. As you've no doubt guessed, while observing your every move each night, I've also borne witness to every intimate moment between you and your husband. This has driven me to the brink of madness, an element I hadn't fully accounted for in my initial plans for revenge. Yet far from hindering my designs, these torments have only fueled the inferno of my jealousy. But after witnessing such scenes of marital bliss, I've altered my scheme. Before delivering your death, I shall first make you watch as your beloved husband dies before your eyes. Only after you've drunk deep from the cup of despair will your own end come. This is my final decision, but fret not, I'm a patient man. It would be far too merciful to proceed to the next act before thoroughly tormenting you as you read these very words. Oe Shunde is in this house. Where? For a moment my mind went blank, unable to comprehend her meaning. You're saying that madman is hiding here in broad daylight. Surely this must be your imagination. Mid-sentence, she suddenly stiffened. Raising a warning finger to her lips, she seized my hand and pulled me into a corner of the room. Then, with deliberate slowness, her gaze traveled upward to the ceiling directly above where we stood. We stood frozen, staring at each other as we strained our ears. Though it was broad daylight, the depths of the mansion lay in such profound silence that one could almost hear blood pulsing through veins. "Don't you hear the ticking?" Shizuko finally whispered, her voice barely audible. At first I thought it was tinnitus, but when I listened carefully, I realized it was a metallic scraping sound. Shizuko had become convinced the man was hiding in the ceiling, that the sound came from his pocket watch. As she spoke, I suddenly recalled Oe Shunde's horror story, The Ceiling Walker. If the ticking wasn't mere imagination, but proof of Shunde's actual presence, it meant he was recreating the very scenario from his fiction, a move perfectly in character. Having read The Ceiling Walker myself, I couldn't dismiss Shizuko's seemingly paranoid claims. After deliberation, I resolved to inspect the ceiling space above Shizuko's parlor to verify if anyone had been there, and if so, how they entered and exited. The attic proved nothing like the sinister playground described in Shunde's story. Though an old house, the ceiling had been completely dismantled and cleaned during year-end maintenance, leaving the space surprisingly dust-free. After only a short distance, I began to realize Shizuko's fears might not be unfounded. Both the beams and ceiling panels bore traces of human activity. A chill ran down my spine. Having read the novel, the image of the unseen Oe Shunde crawling through the attic like a venomous spider made my heart pound so violently I feared it might leap from my throat. The intruder appeared to have traversed the entire mansion's ceiling space, leaving scattered handprints and footprints in the dust. With stiffened limbs, I followed these faint trails, single-mindedly tracking Shunde's movements. As expected, the areas above the parlor and bedrooms showed particularly disturbed dust patterns, likely due to the abundance of gaps between panels, clear signs someone had lingered there. Unfortunately, the prints were too smudged for clear identification, let alone fingerprints, yet I did discover one tangible clue. Above the parlor, tucked inconspicuously beneath a supporting beam, lay a polished metal button embossed with the letters RK Bros Co. It might have been a hat ornament or similar accessory, though I couldn't be certain. When I showed it to Shizuko downstairs, she appeared equally perplexed. I did my best to reassure her, and perhaps too rashly, promised to enlist some like-minded friends to patrol the premises nightly. Fortunately, the Western-style annex had a guest room on its second floor. Shizuko decided they would temporarily move their bedroom there under some pretext. At least in the annex, no one could spy on them from above through ceiling gaps. Thus, these defensive measures were implemented the following day. Yet the sinister machinations of the beast-like Oe Shunde could not be thwarted by such simple precautions. 2 days later, on the night of March 19th, he fulfilled his prophecy, claiming his first victim. Rokuro Oyamada's life was brutally cut short. By the Azuma Bridge, police lines cordoned off the scene as dawn mist swirled around the corpse, laid upon a makeshift straw mat. Rokuro was nearly naked, clad only in white undergarments, but most horrifying was his head, where his close-cropped hair should have been. A dripping wet wig clung to his scalp, its strands still oozing river water. The curtain falls temporarily on Rokuro's bizarre death, his unclothed corpse, that unsettling wig, the dubious drowning circumstances. Is this truly Okawa Harunezumi's vengeance? What truth festers behind this meticulously staged scene? The beautiful widow's trembling hands, the phantom killer slithering through shadows. In our next video, I, the detective novelist, shall plunge deeper into this labyrinth of deception, peeling away each rancid layer until the naked truth lies exposed. Since this video references original material and requires translation work, I've split it into 2 parts. Part 2 is still in production. Creating authentic Japanese-themed content is not an easy task. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know you're looking forward to the next episode. Or if you appreciate this style of content, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next video. A botched murder turns the porcelain beauty into a black-veiled heiress in the blink of an eye. Why does Phantom cease his poisoned love letters? When manacled perversions snap their chains, when each clue peels back another layer of fog, as truth stands flayed bare before the mirror, who is the real beast? Hi, this is Midnight Corridor. Tonight we continue to read Beast in the Shadows by Edogawa Rampo. Though the body had been submerged, no water filled his lungs. The fatal wounds were on his back, multiple deep stabs to the left lung from a sharp blade. Besides the mortal injuries, shallower puncture marks suggested the killer had made several failed attempts before succeeding. The police surgeon estimated the time of death around 1 a.m. the previous night. That evening, at the Oyamata residence, I found chaos. Relatives, employees from Rokuro's trading firm, and friends crowded the house. Shizuko, just returned from police questioning, sat blankly amidst the visitors. With the body still held for autopsy, mourners had placed an improvised memorial tablet before the Buddhist altar, surrounded by extravagant incense and flowers. I don't know how to apologize. This is all my negligence, I whispered, gripping Shizuko's trembling hand. To think he actually carried out his threat. You believe it was him? She asked weakly. Undoubtedly, and last night something else strange occurred. What happened? I whispered. Following your advice, we'd moved our bedroom to the annex's 2nd floor. I thought we'd be safe from prying eyes there. Yet, he was still watching. From where? I asked. The window. Shizuko's voice fragmented as she relived the terror. Around midnight, I retired alone. Rokuro hadn't returned. I was worrying when movement caught my eye beyond the glass. There, pressed against the window pane, was a face, but non-human. Its features frozen in a grotesque smile, staring directly at me. Moreover, the high ceilings of the Western-style room made the space feel cavernously empty when I was alone. Intensifying my fear, I couldn't help but scrutinize every corner. The window had only a single shutter that didn't fully cover the glass, leaving a gap of about 1 foot at the bottom. Through this opening, I could see nothing but pitch darkness outside, a sight that filled me with dread. Yet the more frightened I became, the more compelled I felt to keep looking, until I glimpsed a blurred human face pressed against the glass. For the following month, the police conducted an exhaustive search for Oe Shunde. Yet despite our efforts, the man seemed to have vanished into thin air. Strangely, after Rokuro's bizarre death, the threatening letters ceased entirely. Perhaps Shunde, fearing police scrutiny, had temporarily suspended his plans for Shizuko to focus on hiding. No, that couldn't be. A cunning predator like him would have anticipated this. More likely, he remained lurking somewhere in Tokyo, biding his time to strike. Meanwhile, my relationship with Shizuko grew increasingly intimate. I naturally became both her confidant and protector, openly visiting the Oyamata residence. One day, in her bedroom, I noticed a foreign-made riding crop. At the sight, an unwelcome heat surged through me like oil thrown on fire. Casually, I gestured to it. Did your husband enjoy horseback riding? At first confused, her face drained of color when she followed my gaze to the crop, then slowly flushed crimson, like a ripening apple. "No," she finally murmured. Only then did my foolish mind unravel the mystery of that slender red mark on her neck, its position and shape slightly different each time I'd seen it. I'd found it peculiar, but never imagined her seemingly mild-mannered, balding husband had been a repulsive sadist. Now, a month after Rokuro's death, the absence of those ugly marks on Shizuko's neck spoke volumes. On my return journey, I noticed something, or rather, something that had nearly slipped my mind. The driver, a burly man, wearing a tattered dark blue jacket, had incongruously expensive gloves on his thick hands. Thick gloves, entirely unsuitable for the season. Perhaps that was why they caught my attention. But more importantly, the gloves' decorative buttons. It suddenly dawned on me. The frosted metal button I'd found in the Oyamata ceiling was, in fact, a glove button. The very one still sitting in my vest pocket. Never would have guessed. Yet the driver's glove buttons didn't just solve the mystery of the ceiling artifact, they revealed something far more profound. The shape, color, and size matched perfectly. Not only that, but the glove on his right hand was missing a button. The remaining one bore the engraved letters rk.bros.co, identical in every detail. My astonishment grew, giving way to an indescribable dread. "Oi shunde," I muttered it just loud enough for the driver to hear, then watched his reflection in the rearview mirror. Needless to say, it was a foolish fantasy. His expression didn't change in the slightest. When we arrived at my residence, I tipped him extra and asked a few questions. "Do you remember when you lost that glove button?" "Button? It was never there to begin with." The driver looked puzzled. "These were a gift from the late Mr. Oyamata." "Mr. Oyamata?" My eyes widened in shock. "You mean from the Oyamata house we just left?" "Yes, when he was alive, I often drove him to and from his office. He was a regular customer of mine. I paid a considerable sum to obtain those gloves. Back in my room, I took out the button I'd found in the ceiling for comparison. They matched perfectly, down to the fastening mechanism on the gloves themselves. Later, I brought the gloves to Ginza's premier Western goods store for appraisal. They informed me such craftsmanship was rare in Japan, likely British imports. They also confirmed no domestic branch of RK Bros Co. existed. Considering the shopkeeper's explanation and Rokuro's overseas business trip until September the year before, I became certain the gloves had belonged to Rokuro. The ceiling button must have been his as well. My fingers trembled around the gloves, my temples throbbing. The image of Rokuro Oyamata twisted in my mind. How could that refined industrialist have been the lurking pervert? Yet, if Rokuro was Oe Shunde, why was he murdered? With these questions swirling, I returned to the Oyamata residence, determined to investigate Rokuro's study for clues. My gaze swept across the desk drawers containing business contracts, years of diaries, document folders, and books. Among them, I found 3 pertinent items. The first item is Rokuro's diary from his wedding year, revealing he'd known Shizuko's secret from the beginning, her youthful affair with Oe Shunde, though he'd never spoken a word of it to her. Also, an issue of magazine. Though it contained no works by Shunde, the frontispiece featured a half-page photograph of manuscript paper captioned "Handwriting Sample of Oe Shunde." Strangely, when held to light, the thick paper showed ghostly pencil tracings, as if someone had repeatedly traced the handwriting through overlay paper. The realization made my blood run cold. And then there was Oe Shunde's short story collection, The Ceiling Walker. What astonishing irony, such a book appearing in industrialist Oyamata Rokuro's personal library. I turned to Shizuko, only to find her face drained of color. We had been utterly convinced the culprit was Oe Shunde, yet now, shockingly, it appeared he might have been uninvolved from the beginning. The wealthy gentleman Oyamata had harbored such sinister, childish fantasies beneath his respectable exterior. That mild-mannered man transformed into a detestable demon in the bedroom, wielding his imported riding crop against the pitifully pure Shizuko. Yet this duality is far from rare. The more gentle the facade, the more fervently the demon within may worship its dark urges. As an avid reader of The Ceiling Walker, might Rokuro have discovered the author's real name in the copyright page, and begun suspecting Shunde was Shizuko's heartless former lover. He likely collected every scrap of information about Oe Shunde until confirming the writer was indeed Shizuko's ex-lover. Thus, in The Ceiling Walker, Rokuro found both a kindred spirit who shared his perversions and a hated romantic rival. These realizations birthed his terrifying scheme. Peeping on Shizuko satisfied his curiosity, but for a sadist, such tame games couldn't suffice. So he conceived an unprecedented ploy, forging threatening letters as her ex-lover. He obtained the Shinseinen manuscript photo, painstakingly mimicked Shunde's handwriting, and began sending letters to Shizuko under Oe's name. A bold hypothesis took shape. What if Rokuro was never the victim? What if he was the peeping Tom in the ceiling, the harassment letters his own twisted theater to exert control? A wig and fleeting appearances outside darkened windows, all the more effective, would suffice. No fear of Shizuko recognizing him in her terrified state. That fateful night, perhaps while spying from the attic again, he slipped from a beam, struck his neck, and lost consciousness. Yet, his death resulted from a back wound, not drowning. A contradiction that long puzzled me. So what caused the deep, lung-piercing wound? What could create such blade-like punctures? None other than the broken glass shards embedded atop the Oyamata residence's concrete walls. Some unusually large fragments that could indeed inflict fatal injuries. Rokuro likely fell from the eaves directly onto these spikes. The fatal wounds surrounding shallower cuts also aligned with this theory. As for his naked state, the Azuma Bridge area teemed with vagrants and thieves. It's unsurprising someone stripped the corpse of valuables under night's cover. This later proved true when police arrested a homeless man for clothes theft. When I shared this theory with Shizuko, she remained silent for a long while, her face deathly pale. Finally, an expression of relief washed over her features, perhaps realizing Oe Shunde's threats had been fabrications all along. The imminent danger now dispelled, releasing the tension that had gripped her heart. At dinner, Shizuko generously served imported liquor. Flushed with excitement and her persistent refills, I soon grew intoxicated. Unaccustomed to drink, my cheeks burned, yet an inexplicable melancholy welled up within me as I gazed at her vacantly. The contours of her figure beneath her clothes sent my pulse into disarray. In my tipsy state, the idea of a secret rendezvous with Shizuko took hold. I meant to wait until the maid left to propose it, but overcome by passion, I pulled her into my arms, kissing her while murmuring plans to rent an old warehouse by the river under the sacred pine. To my surprise, she didn't resist but nodded in quiet assent. For over 20 days thereafter, we met at noon in that dilapidated house. Sometimes we chased each other like children through the rooms, her dolphin-like agility evading me until we collapsed breathless in each other's arms. Other times, we wept together in the dim warehouse, our sobs intertwining as we drowned in fervent, clandestine passion. One day, Shizuko brought Rokuro's foreign-made riding crop. For some reason, fear gripped me. She begged me to whip her naked body as Rokuro had. The years under his lash had twisted her very nerves. Now her skin prickled with unnatural hunger when untouched by pain. Later, I again rode in the car of Aoki Tamizo, the very driver who'd sold me the gloves. This encounter would plunge me into a bizarre waking dream. Recalling how I'd once called this driver Oe Shunde, my mind suddenly flooded with details about Shunde until I wondered if the writer sat beside me. Dizziness overcame me and strange words spilled out. "Hey, Aoki, when exactly did Mr. Oyamata give you those gloves?" "Huh?" The driver glanced back, bewildered. "Last year, November the 28th, I think. Payday at the accounting office. Got lots of stuff that day, so I remember clearly." "November, you're certain?" My voice sounded dreamy, distant. But why keep asking about gloves? Something wrong with them? Suddenly I straightened, gripping his shoulder. "Swear it, would you testify in court it was November 28th? The car swerved as he studied the wheel. "Court, don't scare me like that." "But yes, November, others can vouch for it too." Slumping back, I retreated into fevered speculation. The Oyamata residence's year-end cleaning had been December 25th, all ceilings dismantled and scrubbed with lime water. Thus, the button couldn't have fallen there before then. Yet, Rokuro gifted the gloves on November 28th, meaning the button vanished mysteriously beforehand. What did this impossibility signify? My focus narrowed to this single point. A viperous thought struck. If the button was already missing when gifted, someone planted it in the ceiling deliberately. Had Shizuko's terror been an act all along? Late that night, I called Honda, Shunde's publishing house editor. You said Shunde's wife had a round face, always wore Western hairstyles? Honda, groggy, confirmed. Yes. Glasses, bad teeth, those old-fashioned medicinal patches on her cheeks? I ask. You know her? But Western hairstyle with those patches? Odd combo. Nobody uses those anymore. Have you found something? I arrived at the Oyamada residence to find Shizuko already waiting on the warehouse bed, resplendent in an ornate kimono against the pristine white sheets. As I beheld this widow with her lustrous traditional chignon, my mind conjured another woman, disheveled bangs clinging to her forehead, damp tendrils snaking down her nape, that wanton creature who always spent 30 minutes before the mirror rearranging her hair before returning home from our liaisons. What happened with your questions about the year-end cleaning the other day? She asked the moment I entered. Don't you see? I removed my coat as I explained. I made a fatal error, got the timeline completely reversed. The ceiling cleaning was late December, but the driver received the gloves November 28th. The button should have fallen before then. The greatest inconsistency is this time gap. If Mr. Oyamada dropped the button while crawling through the attic, why did it appear months later? Normally, a lost button would remain where it fell. Such a delay defies logic. I suppose so, she murmured, her face ashen as she sank into thought. Shunde's disappearance from magazines coincided exactly with Mr. Oyamada's return from abroad, too precise to be coincidence. My gaze locked onto Shizuko's fluttering lashes and the details of the letter, those letters describing your marital intimacies with such precision, all just happenstance. With each accusation, her body trembled violently, her pallor worsening. Shunde existed, yet Japan's entire police force failed to locate him for 2 months, a famous writer vanishing like smoke. More disturbingly, how did he infiltrate the Oyamada study, pick its locks? My words tumbled out in a deranged litany, sweat streaming into my mouth. Shunde's wife was a sloppy disguise, glasses, false teeth, medicinal patches, Western hairstyle to round her face. The very techniques Shunde described in Panorama Island and the 2-cent copper coin. A Western coiffure to hide your oval face, dentures to conceal your prominent canines, patches to mask the mole on your right cheek. Becoming Mrs. Shunde came effortlessly to you. There never was a Shunde, only fiction. To maintain the charade, you posed as his wife with editors constantly relocating. Plotting Shunde's addresses forms a circle centered on your Asakusa Hill residence, all within 10 minutes' drive. Why did Shunde vanish when Mr. Oyamada returned? Shizuko, you are Oi Shunde. The words exploded from me. She collapsed onto the bed, tears flooding forth. Resentful of your aging husband, intoxicated by the perverse freedom during his absence, you created the perfect scapegoat. By shifting suspicion to Shunde, you could eliminate your husband, inherit his fortune, and live without fear. She sat, broken, her gaze hollow. Shizuko had weaponized my sympathy and infatuation to orchestrate her husband's demise. Rokuro's death was no accident. It was her meticulously planned, perfect crime. Mr. Oyamada wore that wig not to spy, but during your bedroom games, until you pushed him from the window. Having spoken my piece, I stood paralyzed by disillusionment. The woman I'd loved now lay before me as a wounded beast. Hot tears welled unbidden as I watched her. Drenched in sweat, I staggered out like an epileptic. Next evening's papers confirmed Shizuko's fate. She'd followed Rokuro into the river, leaping from the Western Annex's 2nd floor. Her drowned body washed ashore at Azuma Bridge's ferry terminal, mirroring her husband's end months prior. Unknowing reporters speculated the same killer struck twice. I mourned my lover's tragic demise while interpreting her tears as confession. For over a month, I clung to this judgment, but as fevered speculation cooled, horrifying doubts emerged. Shizuko had never actually confessed. While evidence supported my theory, its interpretation relied entirely on my conjectures, hardly definitive proof. Her silence during final confrontations might have been despair, not admission. Had I, in my arrogance, hounded an innocent woman to her death? If Shizuko wasn't the culprit, then my suspicions became the blade that drove her to destruction. Had my irrefutable proofs been but spider silk of arrogance weaving an innocent woman's noose, the thought sent chills up my spine, as if that shadowy beast were now climbing into my own heart. Perhaps within every human heart lurks a beast in the shadows. It lies dormant in the crevices of reason, awaiting its moment, a flawless crime, an utter moral collapse to snap its chains and bear venomous fangs. And so the veil drops on our enigma, the doll-faced widow in mourning silk, whose every tear could be grief or liquid deception, exposing the festering wound beneath society's perfect veneer. In her final tears, she leaves us not with answers, but the mirror that turns all who gaze into beasts. Is the true beast the woman, the stalker, or the darkness we each carry within? Now the lantern flickers. Will you dare peer into the next abyss? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next video. What story shall we share next?